Hello, welcome back everybody to the final presentation of the day. We are so happy that you've all been able to join us. Before we really kick it off, we're going to show our final sponsor commercial. So Janae, take it away.
What we sell isn't something you can touch or see. It's a promise to be there when you need us, to be a listening ear, to be steady when life feels uncertain. You ask, we answer. You reach out, we're there. With each interaction, each decision, each of us is empowered to be your unwavering advocate. Working with you, managing the details, sorting out the complexities, using our expertise to achieve whatever peace of mind looks like to you. A smooth claims process, a comfortable retirement, easier benefits administration.
Is it still playing for you guys?
No, it froze.
Oh, goodness. All right. Hey, at least I got it to play this time.
Yeah.
Here, let me pause it and see if I can get it to go. Nope.
Administration.
Okay. This is awesome. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Well, since we're having technical difficulties, I guess we can verbally thank the Standard for their support of the WCF Benefits Summit. If you would like to watch the full video, they do have it posted on the sponsor page, and they've got additional information in their exhibitor booth. So please do, if you haven't already, go and visit the Standard and check out their information. All right. So with that, I would like to introduce our final presenters today. Kiana Kabanje is the Disaster Preparedness Outreach Program Manager for the Emergency Management Division of the Washington State Military Department. She provides disaster preparedness public education through a variety of programs and publications such as Map Your Neighborhood, Youth Preparedness, the Great Washington Shakeout, the Individual and as well as individual and community preparedness. Her mission is to build community and resilience to disasters by encouraging people to be 2 weeks ready. Kiana holds a bachelor's degree in international rescue and relief from Union College in Lincoln and a master's degree in public health. Also presenting is Brian Terbush. Brian is the Earthquake Volcano Program Coordinator for the Washington State Military Department's Emergency Management Division. His work focuses on coordinating efforts to promote understanding of hazards associated with Washington's many seismic faults and 5 active volcanoes between local, tribal, state, and federal partners. Projects include the Great Washington Shakeout, assisting with state volcano exercises, working on shake alert earthquake early warnings, and individual and family level disaster preparedness for both earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Brian earned a bachelor's degree in geology from Harvard College and a master's degree in geophysics from Boise State University with a focus on volcano acoustics. So with that, everyone, please join me in welcoming both Brian and Kiana.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for having us. We are so excited to be here with you today, and especially since our wonderful friends, Sean and Jordan, have been amping up this presentation. So let me just set the expectation here. Jordan and Sean are actually the experts on what we're talking about today. We've just learned all the great information from them. So if you have any questions, feel free to just send them straight to Sean Davis or Jordan Haynes. I'm kidding. They're our great colleagues. We work with them. You can send questions wherever you'd like. But we are truly so excited to be here with you today. We have a presentation for you that will be engaging with you because we want to learn from you just as much as we talk. So if you can join me in pulling out your phones, there's our agenda. That's what we're going to talk about. If you can join me in pulling out your phones and going to this website, vvox.app. It'll then ask you for a session code, and that ID number is right here on your screen. And throughout our presentation today, we'll be asking you questions to see what you think about things, and so we can engage with you and hear from you and hear your thoughts as well. So if you miss this number, don't worry, it's gonna come up again later. What it looks like when you sign in is this, ta-da! So when you go to the website, vvox.app, you'll see this first screen here. It'll ask you for that meeting number. You can type that in, click join, and then, so don't be alarmed that you don't see any question isn't posted yet. So as we move throughout the presentation, a polling question will appear on our slides, and that is your cue to grab your phone or tablet or another browser, web browser on your computer, and answer the question however you would like. The questions are entirely anonymous, so please feel free to answer them honestly. Please excuse my dog barking in the background, the joys of working at home. And we're really excited to hear your thoughts. We will also be monitoring the chat box here in Zoom and in Whova. So unless you're Sean Davis, please feel free to add comments and questions. So we're going to start with a warm-up question to use vVox, just so you all get the look and feel of how this works. So this is our first question for you today, and it's just to get us all warmed up to vVox. So what region of Washington do you live in? Are you Sean Davis and Jordan Haynes, our fellow friends in Eastern Washington, or Western or Central? So to sign in, answer the question. And if you need that number one more time to join the session, that's in the upper right corner of our slide that you'll see. It starts with 172. And that number will appear again later, so don't worry if you miss it now. Okay, I'm going to close this poll. You will have many more of these to engage with in case you missed this one. So most of us are in Western Washington, a few of us in Central, and the proud Eastern Washington side. Awesome, great, thank you. We have one more question for you before we're going to kick it off over to my colleague, Brian. This question is, are you prepared for another disaster to happen today? If something else were to happen right now, even while we're still experiencing an ongoing disaster in the COVID-19 pandemic, are you prepared for something else? Could be an earthquake, could be a heat wave. I hope it's a heat wave. Could be some other disaster, but how do you feel? Are you prepared for another disaster to happen today? We'll go ahead and close that poll and see the results. And almost half of you just need some more toilet paper. Well, good thing it's back in the stores for you. Just don't buy all of it. Don't run to Costco and get 3 pallets of it. So we're so excited to engage with you during this presentation. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Brian, who's going to talk about the hazards we have here in Washington.
Hello, everyone. I am working on taking control of this presentation at the moment. So thank you for the intro, Kiana. Oh, there we go. And making sure it doesn't jump ahead. So as Kiana alluded to, and I'm sure you're all aware with all of those things, Washington is an extremely exciting place to live. And a lot of that is due to kind of this thing that happens off our coast and beneath us. And it's really hard to see. We've got this thing called the Cascadia subduction zone and all of these tectonic plates that are bumping around beneath us. This is where the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting under the North American plate. And that's a reason we have the second highest earthquake risk in the United States. It's also the reason we have volcanoes. The subduction zone causes those, and it's also the reason we have a tsunami threat. So those are the big three I'm going to talk about today. But as was already alluded to, this is an exciting place because we have wildfires, we got flooding, we got winter storms, we got windstorms. We've already had several tornadoes this year, and more. It really depends on the year. So that's why Kiana later is going to talk a lot about how to be prepared for all of those things and how important that is. So again, I'm going to focus on the big three, earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanoes. So just to kind of give a picture again of Washington being earthquake country, we got these 3 major types of earthquakes that might impact us here. The Cascadia subduction zone is what you might know as the big one or the really big one if you read that New Yorker article. That roughly occurs every 200 to 600 years, depending on who you ask. It's kind of hard to get the scientists to agree on this, but that can be up to a magnitude 9 earthquake. We know our last one was January 26th, 1700, so about 321 years ago, almost and a half. But there's a really interesting story there if you look up the Orphan Tsunami about how we discovered that exact date. The tsunami actually crossed the Pacific and hit Japan, and they have records of it. So in addition to all the stories from the tribes and the people that lived here at the time, we know a lot about what has happened in the past. I'll reference this a lot, but a lot of this geological history of Washington, it's all about understanding what our past was so that we know what the future might hold and what these hazards might be. Okay, so we got the subduction zone earthquake, our 700-mile long from tip of Vancouver down to middle of Northern California. That can cause up to a magnitude 9 earthquake, a really big one. Next, we have deep earthquakes. These the deep Juan de Fuca plate earthquakes. They happen down here in this pink area. And this is where, as that crust is subducting from the ocean, as it's going into there, it warms up, it becomes kind of brittle, and then it can bend and snap. I don't know if anybody's a Legally Blonde fan, but that's how I like to describe those. But that kind of earthquake, when it's very deep here, like 30 miles down, if anybody was here for Nisqually in 2001, that earthquake was felt over a very wide area because it's so deep. And my slide advanced without my warning. So anyway, the other kind we have are these crustal earthquakes, which is actually a lot of the ones in this picture. So I was ready to move on anyway, it's okay. I moved back. So my slide seems to be controlled by someone else, but that's okay. We're made for this. So here's a map. When we say Washington is earthquake country, we want to say all of Washington is earthquake country. And this is superimposed on the back of it. A map that's kind of hard to see, but it just shows all the faults. This is from our Washington Geological Survey map. And kind of a summarized earthquake hazard. Darker colors to the west show a lot more hazard, whereas these lighter colors, lower hazard of earthquakes happening. But as you can see, these are spread all over the state. And this doesn't show everything. This is just when we know that earthquakes have happened. Actually, the largest one on here was a crustal earthquake here. Again, these are the ones that are very close to the surface. It's not those deep ones. It's not the subduction zone one. This is just from the crust. Washington is kind of being pushed together by all these tectonic plates. It's pushed up against Canada and it's being pushed by Oregon. So we're kind of in the middle there. It's a rough relationship with our neighboring states. So, but pretty much anywhere where you have these big mountain chains, there are very likely faults there that can cause earthquakes. That's why you have a bunch out here in the Olympics too, and then in the Chelan area. Chelan. I'm going to try to move forward and see what happens this time. Okay, when we talk about earthquakes, we can talk about measuring them sometimes. A lot of people talk about the magnitude of an earthquake, but I want to make sure you also know what intensity is, because that's actually the one that's more important to you. So each earthquake has one magnitude. You might have heard of the Richter scale, that goes up to magnitude 10. Nowadays, we use the more accurate moment magnitude. It's a measure of exactly how much energy the earthquake releases, how strong it is. Each earthquake only has one magnitude. So we talk about a magnitude 6.8 Nisqually earthquake that happened. However, that was felt differently by everybody. Whether you were close to the epicenter, the place on the surface of the earth that was right above that 30 miles down, you felt a different intensity depending on where you were. So there's also a Mercalli intensity scale. And this is how strong that earthquake shaking feels where you are, how much damage it causes as well. So one earthquake has one magnitude, but a lot of different intensities. And showing those is usually done on a shake map, it's called. Well, here's all the intensities themselves. These are actually, each number here, 1 through 10, is associated with damage levels. Here you can see things like something light shaking, maybe felt indoors by many, might just feel like a heavy truck striking a building. It's light shaking, whereas severe shaking is going to be light in certain areas, but considerable in others. Chimneys falling down. So you have this physical damage. Each of these is also associated with actual ground motion and what ground acceleration happens in these areas measured by instruments. So when we have these up, USGS, the Geological Survey, creates these products called shake maps. So you can see this is a sample for the Seattle fault. We have this great crustal fault that runs right under I-90. Really kind of rude of it to be there in that case. But you can see that right here along the fault zone. A fault is not just a point. A lot of them are lines that are many miles long. But you can get this violent level shaking there. But as you move further away, generally the shaking is less intense. It moves down to this strong or moderate from areas. But this earthquake would be felt very strongly by a lot of places. Again, the Seattle fault, it would be so strong in certain areas because it's so close to the surface. So there'd be like the light bulb is the source. You're really close to it. You might even feel the heat from that light bulb, not just see the bright light. Okay, so we got a VVox question to engage you. To open VVox, what should you do in an earthquake? And that poll is open now. I mean, some of these options, I want you to pick the best one because some of these are, screaming might just happen. It's possible an earthquake can be scary. Once you've done one of these things, you might send a Snapchat. However, there is one answer we would really like you to choose, and we'll talk about why very shortly. Again, these are on the VVox app. You can vvox.app on your browser or phone, and we're going to see what the right answer is and what people picked. Most people said drop, cover, and hold on. One person said scream. What you should do in an earthquake is, that's correct, to drop, cover, and hold on. Running outside, we'll show you some slides of why that is not a good idea pretty short. The right answer there. Screaming is also acceptable. Please do it once you've dropped, covered, and hold on. All right, so here's a picture of what drop, cover, and hold on looks like. We found, looking all over the world, that most of the injuries during an earthquake happen because people are moving during an earthquake. They fall down because the ground is shaking so intensely, or something falls on them. So the most important thing you can do is protect yourself. You want to get down to the ground, that's the drop part. Lower your center of gravity so you're not thrown to the ground by the shaking. Cover, you want to cover your head and neck, and take cover under something sturdy if possible, a desk or something like that, or maybe a sturdy table, or just taking cover, protecting your head and neck with a heavy book or something, away from things that can fall on you as much as possible. And hold on. If you're holding onto that table or desk, you don't want it to shake away from you, and it's very possible that could happen. You also want to hold that position until the shaking stops. It's not about trying to get up and move during the shaking. So here's a picture, again, that Nisqually earthquake that happened on February 28th, 2001. We were extremely lucky no one was killed by the earthquake. Someone did have a heart attack if you hear that there was one death in this earthquake. However, a lot of this unreinforced masonry buildings, this is where the brick is not secured to lateral motion, side to side. They're perfect for gravity, so if it's standing still, it's good. If the building starts to move side to side, all these bricks can fall off. Running outside a building puts you in the most dangerous spot you could possibly be. So again, a lot of people ran during this earthquake, and we are extremely lucky people were not more injured by this. But you can see all these bricks crushing cars and things. And this is the same all over the world. They're working to fix these buildings, but still broken glass, falling, things like that. It is not a safe thing to do. You want to stay where you are. Now we got to talk about earthquake secondary hazards, the other things that might happen during them. When the ground shakes, especially if it's wet, you can get unstable slopes to fall. Fires, we have this example here, the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. After the earthquake, add insult and greater injury to injury. A lot of the city caught on fire. Infrastructure damage, whether it's the fires, but you can also think of gas lines, sewer, water and wastewater. Electricity, you might have power outages for a long time. And liquefaction, if you're not familiar with that, try going to the beach sometime. You might not want to after the tsunami portion, but I still recommend it. You can go stand on the beach and start shaking. If you start shaking yourself, you might sink into the ground a little bit. Earthquakes can also provide that shaking. So some very loose, unconsolidated sediment that's wet can actually have this almost quicksand effect. And that's liquefaction. Things can sink into the ground or become unstable. Interesting to look at pictures. And then a lot of earthquakes. We've just recently learned that our ones like Nisqually, those deep ones, they do not really have many aftershocks, but any crustal earthquake or subduction zone earthquake, you're going to get a lot of aftershocks, potentially thousands. I like to think of it as the fault movement as you getting out of bed in the morning. Whenever I get out of bed in the morning, I still spend a little more time like snapping, crackling, and popping. That's kind of what the fault is doing when you have aftershocks. It's just extra movement there as the crust readjusts to this new position it's in. But yeah, you can have thousands of those, and for each of them, you want to be ready to drop, cover, and hold on when you feel the ground shake, and be ready for these landslides, fires, infrastructure damage, and tsunamis. We'll get to. Another thing I just want to talk about quickly is the shake alert system, which we now have an official date for when that's coming. I saw Sean asked a question. May 4th. This is coming to your phone in Washington. mil.wa.gov/alert. If Kiana could drop that link in chat too, we'll have all the information you need in Washington for how to receive this alert. So how this system works, it is not earthquake prediction, but when an earthquake happens, it puts off two types of seismic waves. These P waves, which are about twice as fast and a lot less damaging. They're basically just sound waves. And S waves, which are shear waves. They do all the damage as it comes through. Now the P waves, again, are about twice as fast. So the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network has put out sensors all over Washington. As soon as this P wave hits 4 of them, it's sent to these servers and computers that calculate what the magnitude of that earthquake is, what the intensity is going to be. And then they send out an alert to all of the areas that are going to receive shaking above a certain intensity. What that alert looks like, you can see it on your phones, and that's what's going to be sent to you. Now, this can provide seconds of warning. It doesn't sound like much, but that is enough time for you to drop, cover, and hold on. That doesn't take long at all, especially if you practice. So we recommend the Great Shakeout every year, but you can practice whenever. Actually, today was Utah's Great Shakeout, so if you want to practice today, just spend you're in Utah. It's sunny. But yes, we're also looking forward to this being used in a lot of critical infrastructure, things like opening firehouse doors in those seconds to make sure that these first responders are able to get out. It is already being used in some water and wastewater systems here in Washington. And then things like the Bay Area Rapid Transit or BART trains in San Francisco. They start to slow down the second they get one of these alerts to help prevent any damage or injury. So this has a huge amount of, is not the only thing we need to do to help mitigate the damage from earthquakes, but it has a lot of positive effects for people being able to protect themselves and also to protect critical infrastructure and lessen the recovery time, hopefully. So coming May 4th, all the details on the site. Washington has over 3,000 miles of coast. If you went up and down all the inlets and all the fjords and all the parts of the sound and around all the islands, that's all 3,000 miles. And they're also all at risk for tsunamis. So we've got a few different sources for how this can happen. But pretty much a tsunami is that, but for these subduction zone earthquakes, that's what happens, except it just pushes this big bubble of water across that can go all the way across the Pacific Basin. Landslides, even ones that are underwater, can also displace this water. And volcanic eruptions can also displace a lot of water. You might have heard of the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. Actually, its landslide pushed Spirit Lake about 2,000 feet up the side of the mountain and actually moved the entire lake. That's also considered a tsunami. Luckily, most of our volcanoes are not on the coast, so they're not too likely to cause the kind that are going to damage the entire coast. Move again. So there are a couple we need to think about here. Local tsunamis, these are the ones that are going to arrive and cause damage within 3 hours. So this is what our Cascadia subduction zone earthquake would be for us. The biggest difference between these two is you will feel the earthquake or you will not feel the earthquake. But really, these are going to have the greatest impact to the coast. A lot of our models show within 15 to 30 minutes of a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, waves up to 60 feet hitting the coast of Washington, the outer coast. About within 3 hours later, you get certainly waves that are smaller, but they're still going to be impacting every one of those 3,000 miles of coast, plus Oregon, plus BC, plus our partners up there. And California, and probably traveling all the way across the Pacific Ocean as well. We're also at risk of distant tsunamis. Now we have Alaska up here as one of these sources. 1964, they had a massive earthquake there. I think it was a 9.3 or 9.4. But we received a distant tsunami from that as well, that did some damage in the Puget Sound within the Salish Sea. These little thing here is you will not feel the earthquake. A little less damage to the coast, but I'll show some pictures later of what one of these distant tsunamis looks like. Actually, well, now is later. So you might have seen pictures and just, yeah, if you ever spend time looking at the March 2011 Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. This is something that we can experience here in Washington. This is what happened in 1700 with a lot less infrastructure involved. But when this tsunami is right off your coast, when it's caused by that earthquake, this is the kind of damage that we can anticipate. Boats that are out there are going to be pushed onto the shore. And even this kind of flaming debris. When you think about these, this was the same tsunami after it traveled all the way across the Pacific Ocean. Over $1 million of damage was done as this just 3-foot high wave came through here. Now, as a wave, this is more like a fast-moving tide that's coming through, picking up all the debris as it goes. And again, there was a lot of damage in Oregon as well. But yes, millions of dollars of damage, at least some injuries were reported as well. So take these warnings seriously. We also, if you're safe away from the coast, I mentioned Mount St. Helens here, Spirit Lake, moving 2,000 feet up the line. Well, the lakes here, some of them are also susceptible to landslides, tsunamis, and commencement. Well, Tacoma Narrows on April 16th, coming up on an anniversary of that deep earthquake tomorrow. But shortly after that, we had a landslide that went into the Tacoma Narrows, and it actually caused a tsunami that went across the Narrows, bounced back, and hit several times. So these aren't always just one wave. And I think that helps answer one of the questions, are areas more susceptible? I would actually recommend for that, checking out Department of Natural Resources, Washington Geological Survey. Their YouTube channel has some really good modeling done. Generally, the areas in the Sound are less susceptible to them, but they can still see a lot of damage. And since that's where a lot of the huge port infrastructure is, that damage could be worth a lot more, could do a lot more economic damage as well. That makes sense. Okay, so how long does tsunami danger last? We've got another interactive question for you, so I'll open the poll here. Again, just looking for the best answer here, what we're looking for. One wave, we have 2 waves, so the tide goes back out. Do we have multiple days? Yeah, these are the danger on the coast, and part of the reason that we'll talk about why. Not encouraging don't go to the coast, but we're encouraging understanding what the hazard is and what you can do in order to be prepared for it. See what you said. Okay, multiple days is what most people said, and that is the correct answer. Not all tsunamis are any one thing, but they can last for multiple days. Now, the thing about tides is tides just complicate these tsunamis as well, because you can think of this massive amount of water moving in, whether the tide's coming in or going out, that's going to affect all the currents. So you can have like really fast currents moving through areas, especially if it's going with them. But that's what does a lot of damage. So some quick myths versus fact. Myth, tsunamis are one giant wave. That can be how they initially start out. But as that energy dissipates through the water, this can be a series of waves, and especially on the Sound as it bounces around over all the islands, reflects, refracts. Some of the tsunami danger can last up to 48 hours, so it's really important to know how you're going to get warning and how you're going to hear that it's safe to come back. If you're up on the beach, tsunamis can travel miles upstream, upriver. And if you look at our So how do you know if a tsunami is approaching? This is the important thing. Ground shaking, again, if it's if you're near the coast, this could be the only warning that you get, especially if it damages some of the alerting infrastructure. If you're near the coast, our partners in New Zealand always say, if it's long and strong, get gone. But you want to drop, cover, and hold on during the shaking. Again, if you get injured during that shaking, you are not going to be able to run. Picture trying to get away from a tsunami with a twisted ankle or worse. Another thing you might notice, these are your natural warning signs, loud roaring sound coming from the ocean. You also might see that the water level drops out. It might look really cool to see the fish out there, but this is a warning sign for a tsunami. You do not want to go out and look. You should move to high ground as quickly as possible if you see the water recede out into the ocean. You can also receive a lot of official warnings directly on your phone. If you are signed up for local alerts, you might get these through there. We also recommend NOAA weather radios. They're not just for weather. These can let you know about other hazards, tsunamis, but also fires. And these are really good because it's kind of like an alarm clock for hazards, or like a smoke detector, I guess is more like it. It'll stay off until an alert for your area plays. You might also see official warnings on TV, NOAA National Weather Service on Twitter, and we have a lot of tsunami sirens along the coast that is going to be fully installed. These are only meant for outdoor use, but if you're outside and you hear one making a wailing sound, it is not the third Thursday in October. You want to get to high ground because that might be your tsunami warning. So know how to get warnings, that's important. We'll try and do advance. So what do you do if you're near the coast and the ground starts shaking? We just went over this, but you want to drop, cover, and hold on first. Protect yourself from the shaking, that's the immediate hazard. And then you want to move to high ground. Well, grab your go kit first. And as soon as it's safe to move, grab your go bag and quickly follow your tsunami evacuation route. Again, the shaking might be your only warning. So do that quickly. Don't waste time waiting, because again, you might only have 15 to 30 minutes on some of these low-lying areas. That's going to be pushing it. Be prepared to walk as well. So your evacuation route, these earthquakes can cause landslides, as we mentioned. This can block traffic. This can block roads. They can take bridges out, power lines down, things like that. Walking is going to be a much better way to do this, and they've done tons of simulations on this. Also, walking is important because it keeps those roads open for the emergency vehicles and for people who really need to drive because they can't walk on their own. Please walk to high ground and then stay there for as long as you need to. So this is another good reason to have that in your go kit, this way to receive those alerts that it is safe to return. So be tsunami ready. I left the slide about Tilly out on this, but Tilly Smith is a British student who I think was 11 at the time of the 2004 Banda Aceh tsunami on a vacation in Thailand with her parents. And she was on there and she had learned about tsunamis in school when the water started moving out, and she ended up just talking to her parents and alerting the local lifeguards, and that this was a sign of a tsunami, something she learned about in school. So you can do this too. If you know that there are these natural warning signs of a tsunami, let everyone else know and get to high ground, because this could be the only sign. She ended up saving a couple hundred people just by being aware of that as they moved to high ground. So yeah, pay attention to the alert levels. If you hear that there's an earthquake, be ready for these and know your evacuation routes. Practice them. If you happen to be in a zone, a tsunami hazard zone, know how to get to high ground or inland as quick as possible. It's a great thing to practice on the Great Shakeout Earthquake Drill every year. I know we have a couple people that are in Eastern Washington here. This stuff is very good to know how you're going to get an alert if you ever go on a vacation to the coast or spend any time there whatsoever. They're nice. I recommend visiting them. Or if you're near a lake, as you saw, that might be a situation you might run into. Okay, and finally going to jump to the third of the big three, Washington's 5 active volcanoes. We do have 5 of them. 4 of them are in the very high threat category, and 1 of them is in the high threat category, Mount Adams. So what do we mean when we say that our volcanoes are active? Here's a graphic from the United States Geological Survey. All of them here in Washington have all had eruptions in the past 4,000 years. Generally, we say 10,000 years and they're active, but these all have magma sources underneath them and could start erupting, at least go into a phase of unrest at any time. It could happen tomorrow. That's why Cascades Volcano Observatory is watching them all very closely. But you can see from this, each of these little volcano symbols represents a period of eruption. So you see Mount St. Helens is definitely the most prolific when it comes to these. Mount Rainier is not too far behind though. Pretty much if people ask which volcano is going to erupt next, Mount St. Helens is generally agreed upon, but it could be any of them. So that's the thing. Know that all of our volcanoes are active, and if you live near one, understand the hazards. So I like this picture of this nice mountain here, conical. It's got that classic shape on a nice lake. Maybe some people remember this one. Probably more so, that was a picture in 1979 of what it did in 1980 when that one dramatically changed its shape into something that looks more like this. So yeah, 1980, that had a very famous eruption that brought attention to the Cascades volcanoes. And as you can see, there's a number in Oregon as well. British Columbia has some volcanoes in the Cascades range as well. It's all because of the Cascadia subduction zone and those plates deep beneath our feet. But yeah, Washington, Mount St. Helens had another eruption in 2004 to 2008, where it had a lot of this like mud flow activity. And it built a brand new dome about 1,000 feet high, built and collapsed a couple times. So every period of eruption is a little bit different. You don't always know what's going to happen when it starts. This one was far less violent than its previous one. A lesser known one, because it wasn't very popular, it didn't cause too much trouble for anybody outside of Whatcom County. 1975, there was a lot of increased heat at Mount Baker. And there was a lot of concern that this was going to erupt. So this actually had some economic impacts. They closed the campgrounds around Mount Baker in the National Forest. They lowered the water in the Mount Baker Reservoir. This is a huge thing that they had to think about, because if there was a lahar, a big mud flow that came down, there's concern over whether that would cause a tsunami that would break the dam, because then that dam release would cause a much bigger problem for people down the river from there. There's 2 dams, so that could be even worse. I really like this picture though. That was a nice rendering in there of this dynamite stick in there. But when a volcano goes into a period of unrest like this, you're not really sure whether it's going to erupt or not. Mount Baker kind of went back to sleep afterwards, but it was being monitored very heavily in this case. So you can get these situations where it starts to wake up and then it has a massive eruption like Mount St. Helens, or it can have an eruption that doesn't really hurt anybody like Mount St. Helens in 2004, or it can show all this activity and then go back to sleep. But any one of those is going to cause us to, emergency managers, especially in the local area, to make decisions that are going to affect people, whether it's closing national parks or whether it's just creating an exclusion zone around the volcano to prevent people from being in this dangerous area. Most importantly though, if an area is closed, it is closed for your safety, because there is this unpredictability with a volcano in unrest. You might have seen a couple of years ago the Vakari White Island volcano in New Zealand. This hydrothermal explosion is something that can happen there when a volcano has magma close to the surface, where that interacts with groundwater and has a massive explosion. So again, if these areas are closed, they are closed for your safety because of all of this unpredictability that can happen. Please respect those boundaries. It's for you. You get all these things that are unpredictable, like the direction ballistics will fall in. They call these ones bombs. Those are still molten while they're flying through the air. But things like landslides are much more likely to happen. You get a lot of steam interaction. The lava flows themselves, or pyroclastic flows, these huge fast clouds of gas and ash that, well, if you're watching the La Soufrière eruption as well on St. Vincent, it was recently 30,000 people were evacuated from that area because these pyroclastic flows were about to start. These are considered unsurvivable. You do not want to be in the area when one of these happens. 600 degrees Fahrenheit and a lot of just rocks in the middle of there. So yes, again, the area is closed, please stay out. We're going to talk about a couple of the hazards that are the most far-reaching in a little while. But overall, that's it. Quickly, one of our hazards is lahars. So I want to talk about which volcanically active country does the word lahar originate from. The geography question for you, and the poll is open. Yeah, some of these are all volcanically active countries. I was really surprised when I initially found out Ethiopia, but it has some really fascinating volcanoes. There's that whole Great Rift Valley area that has a lot of magmatic activity, which is really interesting. Also the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, really fascinating area with a lot of volcanoes. In Iceland, I cannot pronounce any of them, but they're exciting. So I'm gonna close the poll just to keep moving. Though you're probably all Zoom fatigued at this point. Well, let's see what you said. We got Japan, we got Iceland. Oh man, it would have so many more J's and K's in the word lahar if it was from Iceland. And a number of people got the correct answer, which is Indonesia. That's where this word comes from. They're not really snow-capped volcanoes in Indonesia, but you get a lot of them that dump ash all over them. And then you get the same effect when like monsoon season happens and a whole bunch of rain dumps on these volcanoes and it mobilizes that ash and they come pouring down river valleys for miles. Some good guesses here. It's a tricky question. Thank you all for participating. Okay, so when we're talking about lahars here, that is going to be these warmer colors that go down the river valleys. All of our 5 active volcanoes have a lahar hazard. So these are volcanic mud flows, just a mix of debris and volcanic ash and mud, anything that gets picked up as it travels down. This can also involve bridges and structures. So this pink area on these USGS hazard maps is the, excuse me, near volcano hazard zone that I was just mentioning before. Stay out of this area. It will very likely be blocked off. Fortunately for us, most of it is in national forests or national parks in Washington. So it's super easy for the government to just say, close that. Actually, in the state, we don't even have to worry about that because they'll do it for us. It's perfect. We like that. But these yellow areas, if you live or work in one of these areas, it's important to understand what a lahar is and what the hazard might be. If a volcano starts erupting and starts to melt all its wonderful glacial snow cover, you might get this liquid cement basically traveling down. It can be pretty deep too. So generally these are based on where lahars have happened in the past, where they've been mapped. So these red areas, the darker colors are much more likely, much higher hazard. So as you move further from the volcano, it takes a much larger eruption and a much larger lahar to reach these areas. And we're not sure if one will ever actually go up towards Sumas again and into British Columbia, because actually 6,700 years ago, there was an eruption that changed the flow of that river with a lahar from Mount Baker. So some of these probably won't happen again, but just about understanding where the hazard exists. And if you live there, if you work there, if you travel through there, knowing how to get out of that area if you need to. We'll look at those close hazards again. Here's your pyroclastic flows from Mount St. Helens. This was in 2004 to 2008. This is kind of the lava dome it built. Now our lava is not like Hawaii or like what you might see in Iceland right now. It is much stickier, much more viscous. So 2004 to 2008, it's kind of like Mount St. Helens just squeezed out 1,000 feet of toothpaste. It's kind of one way to look at it. But also from that, you can get these debris flows and lahars. Lahars are going to be much bigger when they're very close to the volcano. We just call them debris flows at that point. Only call them a lahar if they're going to go further downstream. Like this example from Mount Rainier. This is about, I think, 30 miles downstream from Mount Rainier. This is about 28, 30 feet thick, and you can see just the massive boulders that are here. This is one of its much older lahars, but Mount Rainier has a huge lahar hazard. Some other more recent examples. This is from Mount St. Helens in 1980. You can see this first scale, this hammer here, just to see how big these boulders are that were lifted up. Pretty much the thing about lahar hazard is if one of these is coming, you need to be out of the way. And we have this bridge in the background that's just stuck in this cement-like material. So for emergency managers, we also need to think about where does this go afterwards? What happens with this? And think about debris management plans. Yeah, you can see some of the damage that this 1980 lahars from Mount St. Helens did to homes and other structures. There's also volcanic ash, which a lot of people noticed in 1980. This is very widespread, so they don't even put it on the hazard maps because it really depends which way the wind blows. any way the wind blows really does matter to me. So here's a map just kind of showing where the ash is going to land. Really depends how much ash has erupted over how much time, what direction the wind is blowing in, and what the speed of the wind is. You can see our 1980 Mount St. Helens. It traveled all the way into Montana. This is like a 0.2 inches or half a centimeter of ash, which is enough to be a nuisance. But Mount St. Helens has had larger eruptions in the past, 3,800 years ago. And our other very explosive volcano, Glacier Peak, almost 15,000 years ago, it had this extremely large eruption. So, yeah, ash coming down in Spokane. There's a lot of stories about it in Yakima as well. This is a whole Washington hazard. It depends where you are. And if the wind happens to be blowing west, it's rare, but it can impact there. Shortly after the 1980 eruption, there was actually a huge amount of ash that fell in like between Portland and Vancouver, and just caused traffic to slow down massive amounts. But yeah, you can see some of the much larger volcanoes have caused it all over just dumped ash all over the United States. But our own ones here can produce quite a lot of ash in the largest eruptions, especially St. Helens and Glacier Peak. Those are the two most explosive ones. They all kind of have their own personality. So volcanic ash is not ash like smoke. It's little tiny pieces of quartz, silica, volcanic rock. So this might sound familiar, but mask up. If you're in an area with this, you really don't want to be breathing it in for long periods of time. You ever heard of silicosis? Kind of can lead to types of cancer as well in your lungs, getting too many microscopic pieces of ash in your lungs. But cover your mouth and nose with a dust mask or a cloth. Also recommended N95s. Good to have those in your kit if you know you're in these areas. And then you want to wet ash down before cleaning it up, because otherwise it remobilizes into the atmosphere really easily. And be prepared to shelter in place with food and water if you want to stay inside for a long period of time. So if you get ready for that, with what Kiana's about to talk about, you are more prepared. Ultimately, our volcanoes are monitored by a group of people, and what the people monitoring are looking for, and I'm trying to speed up a little here, is all these different ways to find out whether there is magma close to the surface, which is the surest sign that an eruption could be coming. It's that period of unrest where they're going to watch it much more closely. So that could be seismic. Any magma movement is going to break rock, so you're going to detect that with these seismometers. You can also put GPS on the top, which can be very accurate for detecting whether that magma is causing inflation. There was a huge amount of inflation before 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. Tilt meters, you can detect whether the ground moves like just a little bit. I'm losing my hand. Sometimes you can even visually see that there's this deformation happening. Also, if there's magma near the surface, you might measure different gases coming out of these vents. Like Mount Baker always has gas coming out. It might change. Also, the temperature of springs, the chemistry. Ultimately, though, what you're trying to find out is there magma near the surface? So folks at USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory watch very closely, and they can put out all of these. Well, this will help answer that question right here. All of our volcanoes right now are in normal or background level, non-eruptive state. All of our volcanoes they are active volcanoes. There is magma underneath them, but it doesn't mean they're going to erupt. If they start to see a change in that background activity, though, the USGS might say it's an advisory or a watch or a warning. And those are going to be the things that lead your local emergency managers in those areas to put different things in effect, like maybe close areas. Ultimately, though, if you live or work in one of these areas, just the best thing you can do is understand what the hazards are there. Be aware of the current levels. You can sign up for alerts to understand when one of these levels changes, and just know how to get to high ground and have a plan for when, what you would need to do if there was a lahar in that area, or if there was a heavy ashfall, or if you were unable to take a certain route because of the volcanic activity. I hope there's still time to pass it on to Kiana at this point, and it is time for preparedness. So I will give her the screen back. There we go.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so now we talked about all the exciting and wonderful and scary things that can happen here in our state. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to prepare for them. So there's 3 basic steps to preparedness. We're going to fly through those in the next few minutes. The overarching thing I'd like you to take away from this today is to not be overwhelmed or scared about what can happen in our state. You can be prepared. It's simple, it's easy, and you can start your preparedness journey today. So we have another polling question for you here. Were you prepared for a disaster before COVID hit us last year? So think back to January of last year. Were you prepared for a disaster? There's 4 options here. You were completely prepared. You were mostly prepared. You were almost there. Or were you that person that stood in line at the store for an hour to buy toilet paper? Or are you not yet convinced that we're experiencing a disaster? I'm going to close this poll. Hopefully you had time to answer. And most of us were prepared. So good job, pat yourselves on the back. That is so exciting to see. So what is preparedness? Preparing is absolutely anything that you do to reduce the impact that disasters can have on us. We can't prevent disasters. We can't even predict them all the time, but we can prepare for them so that our lives are less impacted. So these are examples we have all seen recently. This is what preparedness is not. This is not preparedness. This is panicking. A little graphic we made last year when we saw all the stores losing supplies. We made this to show people that preparedness is incorporating these activities into your everyday life, not your one-time panic and run to the store and buy everything you possibly can. So I encourage you, build preparedness into your everyday activities. It's a whole lot easier that way and more simple. Another question for you before you put your phones down. What is the greatest barrier for you to being prepared for disasters? It might be one of these listed. If it's not, choose other. But preparing can seem overwhelming. We don't want it to be, but there are a lot of things to think about and to do. So what do you feel is the greatest barrier to being prepared for disasters? And I'm going to close this one. Hope you got your answer in quickly. Water. Yes, we will address water in just a minute. It is a lot of water to think about. And if you are feeling like you just don't know where to start, use this presentation today and just take one thing. Just pick one activity that you can do and start tonight, and that'll kick off your preparedness journey. So like I said, there are 3 simple, easy, super simple tasks, activities, steps you can do to be prepared for disasters. So the 3 simple steps to being prepared are learning your hazards, making a plan, and building kits. We already learned about our hazards with Brian, so now we're going to talk about making a plan and building kits. So making a plan is so important, and it gives you peace of mind that when a disaster happens, you know what your family, your loved ones are going to do, and you can just simply follow your plan knowing you'll meet them, you know what they're going to do. You'll want to learn about disaster plans for wherever you spend a lot of time. So if it's home, make sure you have your family plan ready to go. If it's work, your kids going to school, wherever else you spend time, make sure you know what the disaster plan is for that place. You'll want to think about pets, kids, any other dependents who rely on you and have a plan ready for how to support them in a disaster. We're going to skip ahead to this slide. Your out of area contact. So important. This is a friend or family member who lives out of the Pacific Northwest who you can rely on to be a relay between you and your loved ones in a disaster. So teach your family, when a disaster happens, we are not all calling mom. We're all going to text Uncle Bob in Florida, and Uncle Bob can be a relay to serve those texts between you and your family. So we're going to skip this question, but I want you to think about if you don't have an out of area contact, that's something you can do tonight. Find a friend, a loved one, and call them and say, hey, guess what? I chose you. You are my out of area contact, and explain to them what that means. There we go. Part of your plan is thinking about who else depends on you. So anyone who depends on you in a normal day will also depend on you in a disaster. So make sure you think about your pets, your kids, older adults, anyone with access and functional needs, or just whoever makes up your household, your family. Make sure you have a plan specific for what each person will need. Also, you'll want to think about building your emergency savings fund. This could start as small as $2 and then you just keep building. And this is your buffer. So when a disaster happens, you have more options because you've built this emergency savings fund. And there are so many amazing resources to help you get there. We'll add a link into the chat that you can use. It's mil.wa.gov/personal. And there are worksheets and downloadable resources and all kinds of good things to help you meet this goal of having a fund. Also think about your important documents, and do you have copies of things like IDs, financial information, important documents you might need after a disaster to help your family recover. Most importantly, please do this. Take your phone out and grab this QR code on the screen. This is so important. It's signing up for local emergency alerts. If something is happening and is about to affect you, you would want to know about it. And this is how you can know when something is imminent or immediately happening. Brian will also, please, Brian, thank you, add this link to the chat. This is where you can sign up for your county's emergency alerts. Please do that. It's the best way to know what's happening. So that was step 2, making a plan. Now we're on to step 3, building kits. This is typically what people think about when you think of disaster preparedness, is stockpiling stuff. And yes, that is good. Have a little bit of strategy to it and you'll be good to go. The 2 key sets of kits you want to think about. The first one is the grab and go kit. That's something mobile that if you have 1 minute to leave your house safely, you grab everyone's go bags and you're carrying it, you're holding it, and you're out. Your other kind of kit is your 2 weeks ready kit. And that's what you want to build up to having at home. So if you are at home for an extended period of time, you have 2 weeks of food and water and clothing and pet food and whatever else you'll need to be self-sufficient for 2 weeks. Don't forget the members of your family that need extra things like your pets and your kids, and also add a smaller kit wherever else you spend time. So in your vehicle, at work, your kids' school, wherever you spend time, you'll want to have some supplies. And of course, this is one of my dogs. Don't forget to have a picture of you and your pet with your kit in case you get separated in a disaster so you can be reunited. Water. Water is a big one. The recommendation is to have 1 gallon per person per day. And as you're building your 2 weeks kit, that is a lot of water. So don't let this be your barrier. Look at all your different options. You don't just have to store big, large, heavy containers of water. You could also have filters or different kinds of filters. So be creative as you think about your different options for having enough water for your family. Now, the preparedness journey. This is one of my favorite things. We are all on this preparedness journey together. Some of us are more prepared than others, but that's okay. We're all on this journey. I just urge you, start somewhere on your preparedness journey and just keep going. It can be as small as adding 1 can to your cart every time you go grocery shopping. Just start somewhere and keep going. So I want you to think about this. We're not going to answer this question, but do think about, where are you on your preparedness journey? Just don't stop there. Keep going. One way to help you on your preparedness journey is our Prepare in a Year guide. You can download this entire guide and it's really fun to do as a family. There are 12 activities that you can do once a month, once a week. You can choose the timeline, but this will help break down preparedness into smaller bite-sized actions. So feel free to grab your copy and you can do that with neighbors or your family too. You can do this tonight. This is one super simple thing you can do to be better prepared. Just add a couple supplies under your bed. So if a disaster happens while you're asleep, you already have a couple supplies to help keep you safe. We're gonna skip this one too. So talking about neighborhood preparedness, when a disaster happens, we might be at home, since we all spend a lot of time at home these days. The most or the closest source of help are the neighbors around you. So get to know your neighbors and make preparedness a community effort. Once you and your family are prepared, extend that out and invite your neighbors to join you in your preparedness activities. These are all fantastic questions that you can think about later. The last thing I want to leave you with is that we have a brand new neighborhood preparedness program coming out this fall. It's called Be 2 Weeks Ready. It'll incorporate individual and family preparedness activities, as well as things you can do with your neighbors and with your community. So to sign up to be notified when the program is released, it's free. It's available for everyone. That link is on the screen right here, mil.wa.gov/neighborhoods. And our final slide for you is if you have any additional questions, Brian, if you don't mind adding the public education email to the chat, feel free, drop us an email. We'd love to engage with you and talk with you. And this QR code on the screen will go to our website right here, where you can find all of the resources and links and downloads and everything we talked about today. It's all on this website. Thank you so much for having us.
Kiana and Brian, thank you guys so much. That was a lot of really helpful information, and especially with all of us who live on the west side, there's a lot of things we need, a lot of things that could happen that we need to be aware of. And so thank you so much for highlighting those and for all of the guidance with preparedness. I know a lot of the materials that you referenced in the slideshow are also available in the exhibitor booth. And just so everyone who's participating is aware, Whova, the materials within Whova, you'll be able to continue to access for at least the next 6 months, I believe. Is that correct, Shauna? I think it's 6 months. So you will be able to log back into Whova, look up the links, check on the emails, look at the materials posted by all of the presenters, and you'll have access to that for the next 6 months. So thank you again, Brian and Kiana. Final reminders for the summit. This was our, thank you for confirming, Shauna, 6 months. So thank you all so much for attending our benefit summit this year. The virtual platform, we were very thrilled with how it turned out. Thank you all so much for participating, for all of your comments in Whova, for participating at the networking tables, your attendance at all of the meetings. We really appreciate you being here and learning with us and being a part of WCIF. We definitely love working with all of you. We look forward to being able to see you in person. Hopefully later this year, we'll see, fingers crossed. Quick couple or few reminders before we leave. If you are interested in entering the swag box raffle, please send an email to Lisa, Lisa at WCIF.net with the subject swag, so she knows you're wanting to be entered into the swag box raffle. Also, bingo cards. Bingo, it could be diagonal, it could be vertical, horizontal, 4 corners. And if you have blackout bingo, each bingo is going to enter you into a drawing, and blackout bingos go into a second drawing. For lunch reimbursement, please submit if you are a WCIF member group. You can submit through the loyalty program. If you are not a WCIF member group, then go ahead and submit the reimbursement. All of those reimbursement forms do go to Kathy, Kathi at WCIF.net. And please be sure to include your itemized receipt with that request for reimbursement. We will be sending out a post-meeting survey, so you can expect to receive that in your email box, a link to our survey, and we really would appreciate you providing feedback to us so that we learn from you directly what your experience was like and what we might do differently in years to come. Also, if you do have any ideas for future meeting topics that you'd like to be presented at a summit, please let us know in that survey as well. Recordings again of all of these presentations will be available, and we will be forwarding out information once we have that available. And the final thing is that for those of you who've been participating in Whova, you may have seen this, but we did have someone put together a post-summit health and wellness activity brainstorm. So there will be a virtual meeting starting, well, probably now already on the community board to help brainstorm some health and wellness ideas. So if you learned some things, you picked up some things, or you've got some ideas you want to share, please feel free to join the post-summit health and wellness activity brainstorm on Whova. Thank you all again. We appreciate your time and you being a part of WCIF. Thank you. Bye-bye.